Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen from around the world. Welcome to the StrategEast live webinar. And as you all know, the title of today's session are Fiscal Measures in the Eurasia region to foster economic recovery. All of us know that each of our countries have suffered a severe economic downturn, a recession due to COVID. The ongoing debate is how long will it take for there to be an economic recovery? Will it be a V? Will it be the swoosh like on a Nike shoe? Will it be a W? And God forbid, and I don't think it will be an L. I think it will be more of a swoosh. But let's remember, following the 2008-2009 global economic crisis, it took an average of 7 to 8 years for each country to recover their revenues. Now, revenues are essential, obviously, to deliver the services to your people as a government and with health at the front of that line. At the same time, your tax policy to generate that revenue is a key factor in how competitive your country is in attracting investment. And attracting investment is a key determinant in fueling your economic recovery. So we have a distinguished panel of public and private sector experts to talk about this from Georgia, Kazakhstan, and in Europe. Let me just very briefly introduce our panelists. We're going to do this in an interactive discussion format. So our participants, you will not be subject to long speeches, but a lively discussion. And we hope you will contribute to our discussion by feeding us questions throughout. So very quickly, an introduction, and we hope that you have read the emails that will give you more details. But real quick, Arsen Aldanov from the Republic of Kazakhstan, the State Revenue Committee. Susana Bokobo, professor at University of Madrid, former president of the International Chamber of Commerce Tax Commission. Levan Dgebuadze, who is head of the service department, and I think taxpayer service is part of that, from the Republic of Georgia. And it would be interesting to hear from Levan about how you interact with your customers, the taxpayers, in this contactless world. Illya Sverdlov, tax partner at DLA Piper in Kiev, Ukraine, and we also have added Mr. Mira Gelshavali, head of the macroeconomic forecasting and fiscal policy units of the Ministry of Finance of Georgia. So I think, Sir, Mr. Mira, your inputs on economic recovery will be very valuable. So let's go ahead and start. What I'd like today's discussion to look beyond COVID. There have been numerous discussions, and I think there have been great things done in countries around the world, advanced economies, developing economies, for emergency relief measures. So I would like to look beyond those measures to post-COVID economic recovery. And make no mistakes, with all of the debt governments have taken on, starting with mine in the US and in the European Union, governments are going to need more revenue. But governments also need economic recovery. So ladies and gentlemen, how do we strike that balance? And why don't we start out, Arsen, hearing from you. Kazakhstan has announced an economic recovery program, tax simplification, tax reduction is a part of that. Let's start with you. For this first question, I'd like to go in alphabetical order by surname, and then we can mix it up. Arsen, over to you. Arsen, take your mute off, please.
Do you hear me well now? Okay. Dear colleagues, many thanks for giving me the floor. I'm proud to be talking to you here, and thank you for an opportunity to participate in the discussions. I'm going to share with you information measures have been applied by the State Revenue Committee of Kazakhstan to relieve burden for taxpayers. So, let me start with a short brief information. During the state of emergency in the country, we were told to provide unprecedented support to small and medium-sized businesses. Kazakhstani entrepreneurs need additional support in terms of reducing the tax burden. So, therefore, for small and medium-sized businesses in the most affected sectors of the economy, the accrual and payment of taxes and other payments from the wage fund have been cancelled for 6 months. In current conditions, the government of the Republic of Kazakhstan, on behalf of the head of the state, takes urgent measures to support small and medium-sized businesses. New initiatives include increasing the availability of business to financing the implementation of additional tax incentives and limiting business from inspections. So, in accordance with the decree of the head of state on further measures to stabilize the economy, tax incentives have been adapted to support business. They cover various sectors of the economy, from trade to tourism. Preferences for entrepreneurs or tax holidays for the state of emergency until June of this year. A delay was granted on the payment of all types of taxes and other obligatory payments, social payments for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Also, until June 1st of the current year, the adoption of measures to charge interest, suspension of expenditure operations, restrictions of the disposal of property, and measures for the collection of tax and customs debt, social payments debt, except for taxpayers with a high degree of risk, was suspended. So, a property tax exemption has been established before the end of the year for large shopping facilities, shopping and entertainment centers, cinemas, theaters, exhibitions, and sport facilities, as well as for taxpayers working in the catering, hotel, and tourism sectors. The taxpayer has the right to provide an additional circulation of the amounts of current payments on property tax and land tax for the next 3 terms. First deadline of payment of current payments passed in February, based on the fact that 3 months, January, February, and March, the rate is in accordance with the tax code, and for the next 9 months, the taxpayer has the right to nullify his current payments. At the end of the year, a declaration will be submitted based on such a tax calculation algorithm. Individual entrepreneurs working in accordance with the generally established taxation procedure are also exempted from individual income tax by the end of the year. In order to support the agro-industrial complex, the import of biological assets of the agro-industrial complex, including cattle and breeding chickens, will not be subject to VAT. Along with this, agricultural producers will not pay land tax on agricultural land. At the same time, in order to level out price growth, the VAT rate was reduced from 12% to 8% for socially important food products until October 1st, 2020. This rule applies only to socially significant foods. In terms of tax administration, until June 1st, 2020, a delay was introduced for small and medium-sized businesses on the payment of all taxes and obligatory payments to the budget and social contributions. Individual income tax, social and medical insurance for an employee, as well as enforcement work debts on tax, customs, and social payments. In order to reduce fiscal pressure on the business for the period of emergency, tax audits were suspended. At the same time, we were instructed to exempt small and medium-sized businesses from the payment of taxes and obligatory payments from the payroll fund for the period from April 1st to October 1st of the current year in the most affected sectors of the economy, including retail facilities, catering, hotel business, transport, and consulting services, and IT. For the mentioned sectors of taxpayers until August 15th, 2020, the accrual of interest on all unfulfilled tax obligations was suspended for all types of taxes, and the tax reporting deadline was postponed to the third quarter. The principle of payment of VAT on imports by the offset method is that the importer VAT payer has the right not to pay VAT when filing a customs declaration. But there are a number of conditions. The importer must be a VAT payer. The goods are not intended for further sale. The importer in the next tax return reflects VAT both in the offset and in sales. In case of further sale before the expiration of 5 years, VAT on imports is payable from the date of import with interest. Also, the deadlines for the execution of notifications based on the results of cameral control sent from March 15 to April 15 of the current year, with the exception of taxpayers with a high degree of risk, have been extended. Excise tax exemption now. Producers of gasoline, excluding aviation, and diesel fuel exported are exempted from paying excise taxes. By the end of the year, oil refineries for exported gasoline, excluding aviation and diesel fuel, 500,000 tons of gasoline worth 12 billion tenge were exempted from excise taxes. According to the current legislation, the payer of excise duty is a producer of petroleum products, regardless of further sale within the Republic of Kazakhstan or for export. Although the owner of the oil and the resulting petroleum products is not the owner, is a dealer. In this case, the export of excisable goods shall be exempted from excise duty. The excise rate for gasoline production is 24,395 tenge per ton. For diesel fuel production, 9,300 from July to November, 540 tenge from December to June for the sowing season per ton. Thus, exported products shall be cheaper by the amount of excise duty. To administer the volume of refining and exporting petroleum products, a temporary procedure is being developed for the provision of information by the tax authority from the producer and contractor. Data from excise and customs post will also be used. Now, about declarations and notices. The deadlines for submitting declarations were extended from, until April 30, 2020, from March 31. A decision was made to extend the deadline for submitting declarations based on the results of 2019. When a debt arises, a notice of debt repayment is not issued and enforcement measures are not taken. Settlement accounts are not closed and property is not described. The deadline for the execution of the notice on cameral control extended during the state of emergency, except for taxpayers with a high degree of risk, were extended. Notifications on cameral control, which require execution within the period from March 15 to April 15, the deadline was postponed to June 1st. In order to minimize contact between taxpayers and tax authorities, a decision made to postpone the deadlines for the notification. Thus, taxpayers who have the deadline for executing a notice may not provide it with a response until June 1st, with the exception of taxpayers with a high degree of risk. In this case, the restriction in the form of suspension of expenditure operations on settlement accounts will not be applied. Now about tax checks and penalties. The deadlines for inspections by the state revenue authorities for the period of emergency were suspended. 1,400 inspections were suspended in overall. Inspections were suspended during the state of emergency. However, after completion of the emergency, inspections were resumed. So they're done. I'm done.
Arsen, thank you very much. And what I'd like to ask, I suspect our colleagues from Georgia, Illya from Ukraine, Arsen, could we get documents? Could you send them to Senya that kind of summarize, even if they're not in English, that's fine. Perhaps we could post these with the follow-up from our webinar, because I think there's a lot of examples and good practices to share from what you summarize. Susana, I'd like to turn to you. I've known you for many years as a senior tax officer at Repsol. In the petroleum industry, and I'm thinking of Kazakhstan, the precipitous fall in oil has changed the economics of many projects. How are companies looking at things, and how can tax policy be win-win to have a project stay viable and have you stay in a country rather than exiting a country? I think that would be really interesting when we talk about balance. And then you've heard enough from me. Let's go right from Susana to our colleagues from Georgia, and then over to Ukraine without me intervening. So we'll just keep moving, and then I'll come back when we go to the next question to talk about the IT sector. So Susana, our Georgian colleagues, and then Illya.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having the opportunity, or for giving me the opportunity to share my ideas and my knowledge with all of you. I'm gonna be more not so in details, because my intention is to give you a broad idea of what is being doing in general and what should be done, or what could be done, because COVID-19, it is an unprecedented situation, and it makes us thinking about how to move quickly and how to face the next crisis. Because there are going to be a lot of crises, so we have to learn how to be, or how to live in with the uncertainty. So all the measures that have been put in place are the goal of them are to reduce taxes. And this is absolutely understandable, because it's a way to enhance businesses, cash flow, households' cash flows, and also to support consumption, to stimulate employment, and so on. But if we think about that, if we are reducing taxes, that is what, in my opinion, is what countries should do in that moment. We have to realize that we are reducing the resources that the countries need to reboost the economy as well. So we have to balance between the way to reboost economy and the way to find resources for the services that the countries and the people and the businesses they need. So what is important to keep in mind? It is important to keep in mind the strengths of the countries, in the sense that what are the best way to improve economies and to give the confidence back to the investors. And this is another important issue to keep in mind. And it is important to realize that we are in a globalized world. We can't think as a country by country. We can't think in a unilateral way. And this is another important thing to keep in mind. Countries need to cooperate just to find a way to reboost the global economy. And this is something that is quite difficult to maybe to understand when when some countries are being hit so hard by the COVID-19. What are the best measures to be implemented? Well, to answer this question, it is important to know what are the goals that we want to achieve. I mean, are we thinking about agriculture sector or tourism sector or the culture sector that is so important for a lot of countries here? Or are we trying to improve the oil and gas sector? And this is quite difficult in the sense that oil and gas sector is suffering a lot in many ways. And I mean, there is a consensus, a general consensus that we the world, I mean, have to make a solid transition to other energy resources. This is important to keep in mind as well. So if we are going to renewable sources of energy, and if we are thinking that and this is something that is demanding by the citizens in general, how can we improve? How can we support that is needed, support the oil and gas sector? So the way to support them is just to allow them to the businesses to navigate to this new world. And it's difficult, but it's something that is important to work in. And yes, and I know that I'm being provocative, and this is something that is important for this discussion. But yeah, my last point in this case is what other taxes we can or countries can put in place for having resources, or for getting more resources. Well, it is difficult to think of some taxes that are not harming the vulnerable people and the most vulnerable people. But well, if we are thinking of some sectors, we can think about digital services. But this is quite controversial, and as you know, the OECD and the Inclusion Framework, they are working on this, and this is being difficult because everything is going to get digital. And nowadays we are, in this case, this is a perfect example of that. We are having a meeting in an online meeting, and we are just having a lot of webinars and trying to connect one to another with this mean. So what can we do with these digital services that we are all providing? Not only the giants that we can have in our hands, in our main. So we are trying to, we have to figure out and rethink everything related to tax policy. We have to rethink the goals. We have to rethink the measures. We have to rethink how to prove that the measures are effective, because maybe we are just having a lot of measures that are absolutely necessary to have, but are these measures going to be effective for boosting the boosting the economy? And this is the last question I'm posing to you, and I give the floor to the next exponent. Participant, yes.
Hi everyone, it's a great pleasure for us to participate in this conference. Let me focus mostly on the first question in our agenda, looking beyond the COVID crisis, and I want to touch the trade-off between the needed resources and that government want to support the economy. This I think one of the most actual question, and that is the question which is I'm sure on the table of every government in every country. I think we have to, when speaking about this trade-off, I think I have to start about assessing what kind of crisis is in place. I think everyone agrees that this crisis is mostly temporary event because of this pandemic. There is a reduction of demand on the face-to-face services and on the face-to-face contact, and this is the main source of the of this crisis, and it is temporary because sooner or later every pandemic is contained and everything goes back. And this is normal in this situation that governments should use their buffers. They may have some buffers or use the fiscal space they have, increase the debt and everything. But what's the trade-off? High debt is associated with high risks in the economy. I think for the developing countries, international financial institutions did a great job that they suggested them huge resource of the concessional borrowing, and it very much reduced the risk for the next year financings. And I think it allows government to be more expansionary during this crisis period, and this is a great opportunity because in the short term, when we want to start fiscal consolidation, it mostly happens at the cost of the capital investments, capital spending, and it is very harmful for the economy. I think for the revenue side, what kind of revenue can be mobilized? I think only room of the new revenue measures is some kind of excise taxes, which is less harmful for the economy if there is a room to increase excise taxes. And I think I think it is also a good idea to think about abolishing tax expenditures. If the economies have tax exemptions, it is good time to start gradually decreasing these tax expenditures, because it has negative effect of the efficiency in the economy and mobilizing the taxes from abolishing tax expenditure. I think it is one of the most growth-friendly measure. This was my general view about this question, and Mr. Levan provide more details about what we are, because what I said, it is some medium-term perspective. It's impossible to do it very shortly. In the short time period, there is needed more socially oriented measures, and Mr. Levan will tell you what we did.
Hello once again to everyone. During the period of pandemic COVID-19, I will explain what measures we made for taxpayers, tax which reliefs we have introduced in our tax legislation. I will begin from the amendments of tax code. For example, as we agreed all, I think the tourist sector is very hard hampered in this period. So we decided, and we take such amendments that gives for tourism sector completely exempt them from property tax in 2020. Another change amendment was enabling persons of tourism sector to defer paying income profit tax until the end of 2020, starting from the May of employees working in private sectors whose remunerations does not exceed 1,500 GEL, exempt from PIT personal income tax on the amount of 750 GEL for following 6 months period. We think that these measures will stimulate business and entities persons who operate in this sector. Next measures, we persons the fixed tax of March, May, and April was not accrued to the following activities: beauty salon, manicure, pedicure, solarium services, and so on. For small business, it was a big stimul, we think so. Then VAT exemption has been applied to the supply or import of goods of medical purpose, such as protective face shields, masks, bucklers, clothes, insulting, and so on. Taxpayers of gambling business may resume their activities after the end of the state of emergency and pay the fee proportionally according to the actual working days instead of advance payment for the entire reporting period. And what is very important, for the purpose of automatic VAT refund, the process of responding to the risk of registration has been simplified. The procedure for refunding money in the part of submitting a taxpayer request has been simplified, and we are going to increase VAT refund numbers for especially exporters and who are activated in the field of production. Production maybe in different areas. As for communication, what we did in this area, of course, we decreased face-to-face contacts through the because we used the call centers. We increased employees in this area. We use service of RS car. We use this service especially for the mountain regions where we have not service centers, and taxpayers cannot reach because it is connected with the expenditure, so we use RS cards in this area. Mails, we consult taxpayers using mails, and then they can, in Georgia, especially electronic declaration is used by 90% of taxpayers, and we have for them more than 316 electronic applications. They can apply and receive answer without coming to our service centers. So in this area, I think we simplified communication with tax agency. We use for explanations video instructions, and all of these measures, I think, in combination with control measures, provide better collection of taxes.
Okay, Illya.
Yeah. Now, as a representative of the private sector, I will comment. I will try to be brief on that. So, for Ukraine, the situation with the response to COVID-19, like fiscally wise, it was, I would say, quite standard for our regions. There were no specific like tax holidays and stimuluses or subsidies provided. Mostly the measures related to deferrals in payment of taxes, reporting, some exemptions for land tax and property tax, and basically standard VAT exemptions for medical equipment related to COVID-19. If I ask myself whether this response was sufficient, I think, well, it could have been much better. I think that some businesses really need more support, specifically small and medium-sized, and the government should consider some tax exemption maybe going forward, because those industries have suffered significantly. So again, I think that little was done. It was sufficient, but I think that in months 2 or 3 there will be need to reconsider some additional tax measures directed at really boosting the economies which suffered most, small and medium-sized businesses. So I think we will need to see how it develops. I agree with Susana that there should be some new way of thinking on how to respond, because we are sometimes doing things which are really outdated and doing like some tax anti-avoidance measures which already do not work, but we don't look at like economic stimulus rather than just creating some sophisticated tax norms which are difficult to comply with. So I think people want simple measures, want clarity, and want lower taxes. I think that could be the recipe for businesses going forward. So I think this is it on my side. I think let's continue further on other questions.
Well, thank you, Illya. I couldn't agree more. And I want to mix it up now. When Illya made that comment, I couldn't help but think of the 19 May National Recovery Plan announced in Kazakhstan. And one of the principal objectives was, I'm quoting, reduction in the tax burden and simplification of the tax administration. So not simplification of the tax law, but of the kind of things that Illya said. So I'd like to throw that out. Secondly, when Levan mentioned some bold changes, might this be a way to take some systemic steps, like a flat tax for corporate income tax, a flat tax for personal income tax? I think there have been great revenue results, great compliance results in Russia, Estonia. And you know, I'm always cautious of tax or investment incentives because they can often be very complicated. They offer a lot of subjectivity at times, but might we consider those? And Levan, I'm mindful that that is the opposite of what you said. You know, we need to get rid of tax expenditures. Well, usually tax expenditures are fancily called incentives. So let me throw that out. Please, let's make it a little bit of a free-for-all. You know, on mute and jump in.
If you allow me, I would like to highlight as well what the previous participant has said. It is really crucial and important to facilitate the lives of businesses and individuals. And when I say facilitate, is a better administration of the taxes, and this is going to be good for the administration, the tax administration too. It's not only good for taxpayer, but also for tax administration. Something that is simple, but it doesn't mean that it's not effective. Because, well, I can say that every day we have new laws, tax laws, very complicated. Sometimes we don't know what is enforced and what is not. So let's think it in a simpler manner for everyone, because at the end of the day, what we all want is just to growth as countries, so to growth as individuals. And this is really crucial nowadays, that so many people are dying because of the COVID. So many businesses, small and medium-sized businesses are closing down. Just try to think out of the box. And it is not, sometimes it's difficult because we are used to hear the same things always, and maybe to have a flat tax rate, it is the solution. And yes, it is difficult to think about that, because it can be unfair in some cases. But maybe we have to try to think or try to look at the big picture, and not only in a small thinking of the small details that are only just doing us to lose ourselves in the trees and not look at the forest. So, well, I'm stopping here. I would like to hear other opinions. Thank you.
Well, Arsen and Levan, it would be really interesting to hear from you from the perspective of sitting in revenue offices. I mean, your heads of state say, we need to help the small business, we need to help all of the enterprises, but make no mistake, you're feeling enormous pressure to fill your budget. You must collect revenue to deliver for your people. So it's a real trade-off. And as Illya and Susana were just mentioning, it's something that I've said around the world. You know, paying taxes should be simple, easy, and not scary. That can be win-win for you, the revenue collectors, and the revenue payers. So with that, share with us the realities of sitting in a very hot seat to fill your budgets.
Okay, let me comment on that trade-off, because of course in that crisis situation there is always a tend to reduce taxes, trying to maintain businesses and something. But on the other hand, there are many things because always this tax exemptions, tax incentives, so-called from the macroeconomist point of view, it is a tax expenditure and it is associated to the distortions and the trade losses. I think, of course, in Georgia as well, we had some so-called tax incentives for most affected sectors of the economy. But first is this measure was temporary, and for the property tax, I don't think it is any special tax incentive because if you calculate the property tax from the market value of the property, I think for the tourism sector, market value of the closed hotels and restaurants is close to zero, and it was the right measure for now to abolish for this year property taxes. Or I think it was not bad for the efficiency of the economy. But I think I agree with Mr. Denwit that the good practice of the tax policy is to have flat rates, simple tax system, and even approach to everyone. I think it's a right tax policy. I'm always supporting this policy, and I recommend. That's why, in the medium-term perspective, to make fiscal consolidation, which will be which won't be harmful for the economy. I think only right way is to make the tax system more efficient and more growth friendly.
Arsen?
Well, honestly speaking, the first priority for us is to relieve the burden for taxpayers, and so that to mitigate dire consequences of this virus, of this COVID-19. Fortunately, we are not severely hit country like in Europe, but we are still looking for any opportunity to make life of taxpayers happier and easier and more comfortable. So, and yes, I agree with the point that this virus's impact was on revenue collection and on work of tax administrations, but we are slowly recovering with the help of our partners, of regional and Western partners as well. So I'm done.
Okay, let's transition and talk about the IT sector. I mean, StrategEast has been one of the leading voices on the development of the knowledge industry, the IT industry, and a lot of governments around the world are feeling like we're not taxing those sectors enough. The paradox is, without digital services, we wouldn't be having this webinar. You know, is the platform that we're using paying, you know, a proportional share of corporate income tax in Georgia, Ukraine, Spain, and Kazakhstan, and the United States for this call? I mean, that's the complexity of these issues. And again, I think that this disruption from COVID, as painful as it is, it will force economic diversification in each of your countries, and it's particularly going to be pronounced in an energy-rich republic like Kazakhstan. So how can taxation play a role, and how, Susana, must we be cautious to not, kill the baby as a stillbirth, as you're trying to get these industries developed in your countries? And let's not limit this to the OECD Pillar 1, indirect tax. I mean, I think, it should be fairly easy to make sure digital pays VAT. So let's look at, economic diversification. How do you tax those diversified economies? And then let's look at that from direct and indirect. So let me throw that out. Illya, I know you've done a lot of thinking, and then I think we've got 10 minutes. So I would like to finish. I really would like to hear from Mirza as a macroeconomist. I'd like to go real quick at the end. So think about it. What is your view on economic recovery? Is it going to be a V, a swish? So that will be our concluding comment. And let's get into IT and tax.
Okay, so as a first comment, I think that the crisis indeed skyrocketed some of IT businesses. I think Netflix sales have grown significantly, and as a Ukrainian and user of Netflix, together with other Ukrainians, I would think that Netflix should pay something to our coffers and to our treasury. But on the other side, our country has not been very aggressive in terms of digital services taxes, and Ukraine hasn't even introduced VAT, which other countries did, like Belarus, like Russia. I don't know whether Georgia introduced digital services tax. So I think that indeed there should be a balance, as everywhere. I definitely think that whereas consumptions take place in our countries, IT companies should pay indirect tax and VAT on that. In terms of corporate taxation, that's a big dispute about where the value is created, etc., etc. There are books have been written on that, and I will not go into details on that. Yeah, but definitely I can think that indirect tax is very efficient in terms of from treasury perspective. So I think that should be done. But returning it to another angle for IT and for Ukraine, I think that given that we have become the IT outsourcing like Mecca in Europe, and I think in the world, I think government should further continue giving additional tax benefits to the industry. However, and I think in this year much has been done, and thresholds for private entrepreneurs have been increased, and I think the industry is still in good shape. So I have very good expectations that it will not be as affected as other industries.
How about Susana, comment, and then let's have a real quick feedback from the keepers of the state budgets.
Yeah, we have to think in three different categories. One is what the IT sector means, in the sense that many entrepreneurs are creating platforms. Second, what can we do with these giants? And we all use Netflix, for example. That was the example that was saying. What is the best, or how can we, our countries can tax these earnings they are having in their countries? And the third point is that how can administration use the IT for improving the relationship with the taxpayer. For example, with the tax filings that making them by internet, for example. So we have here 3 different areas that could be analyzed and for having just good results after this, after just thinking about all these 3 areas.
Thank you. Levan, Mirza?
Okay, thank you very much. So, okay, let me comment on the IT sector. I think IT sector is one of the most important sector. It is well-developed sector, and I think it is very important for the economy, for the global economy as well. Also, when people are talking about some special tax regimes for the IT industry, which is, I think, I'm not against it, because IT industry has a positive externality on the economy, and if you ask economists, it is normal to have different tax regime for IT sector, and I think it is quite normal. However, considering this issue in the context of COVID pandemic, I think I'm not sure it is a right time to discuss about IT sector, because in this crisis, IT sector and the medical sector are one of the most demanded sectors, and I think they are one of the less affected sectors of the economy. And in general, I agree that we have to think more about IT sector and the special regimes about this sector, but I'm not sure it is a good time. Now is a good time to think about the tax policy which supports economic diversification. I will again repeat that even improved to everyone, it is a best source of diversification economy, because when we're talking about diversification, on the other side, there's always the efficiency of the economy. The diversification is good when efficiency is a share. On the cost of the efficiency, I'm not sure that the diversification. But no one talks about diversification at the cost of the efficiency. And Mr. Dan also asked about what kind of recovery is expected this shock. Am I right, Mr. Dan? Yeah. I think it really depends on the situation of pandemic. If for Georgia, we really consider 2 scenarios. We had the supplementary budget just a week ago, and we did the 2 scenarios. One scenario assumes that implicitly it assumes that the vaccine will be available this year, and the recovery will start next year. It will be like V-shaped recovery. And if we have also some pessimistic scenario, it assumes more time needed for the vaccine, and for the baseline scenario, we have -4% growth projection, and for the pessimistic scenario, with it's more like U-shaped recovery, it is -9.5% growth. I think it really depends on the epidemiological situation. However, we do not expect full recovery, for example, in the medium term period. I mean, for example, 2025, will the GDP level the same as it was projected without pandemic? Of course, no, because first is a balance sheet effect that countries have higher debt than without pandemic. Second is that we observe distortions in the supply channels, and it is kind of productivity shock, and we expect for the longer time, we estimate in the longer time period about 4 to 5% level shift.
Well, Levan, thank you. And I want to thank all of you. As you shared those sobering statistics, I'm reminded that we have some of the most resilient economies, most resilient societies in the world here: Georgia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine. I think about everything you have endured successfully and come out stronger since your independence in 1991. So I'm confident that there will be a very happy story. It may be 3 years, it may be 5 years. You're going to play a key role, each of you, as economic leaders, whether it be in government or in the private sector. I want to thank you for sharing today. StrategEast will do its normal excellent job following up with all of our viewers and presenters by email. And also this will be, it has been recorded. It will appear on Facebook and YouTube. And I want to thank our presenters. I want to thank you, Sonia, and thank StrategEast for another great opportunity to share our views amongst policymakers in Eurasia. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.